Hi everyone, it's Tracy DW, back for another episode of Stories to be Told, the podcast series. Is it just me? I have often wondered how America became the nation that it is today. It is impressive that back in 1776, those 13 colonies managed to gain victory and independence over what was then arguably the most powerful nation on earth. How did those 13 colonies evolve into the 50 states that have become the largest economy and has a presidential electoral process that, once every 4 years, selects the most powerful human being and so-called leader of the free world? The origins of modern American ideology are steeped within the lucrative trades of cash crops, which defined an infrastructure developed from the system of plantations and enslavement. As an ordinary person, I think I can identify with other ordinary people outside of America who have probably overlooked this part of history in the same way that I have. We focus a lot on slavery across America, but it is almost as if we have taken for granted just how America got here. So how did America get here? In this podcast episode, I'd like to make a quick focus on an event that cannot be overlooked: the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. This was the most significant and cheapest purchase of land in America's history. It was originally intended to be the sale of what we know today as New Orleans, the land marked as the estuary of the Mississippi River that France had laid claim to in 1682. However, the land west of the Mississippi Basin had also been under French occupation since 1699, and this land was ceded to the Spanish in 1762, only to be reclaimed back into French hands by Napoleon in 1800. Together with New Orleans, it was sold to a newly formed America. It was a massive expanse of land, some 2 million square kilometres, and costing the colonies around $15 million in those days. This purchase gave free access to trade along the river and through its port into the lucrative markets of the Caribbean, and undoubtedly strengthened the existing colony's position both materially and strategically, as well as swelling the French coffers. What is the significance of this event in terms of Britain's colonial past? Well, England originally created the plantation settlements that became the 13 colonies along the east coast, and even after 1776, the legacy of indenture servitude and enslavement had both become an endemic part of the social, moral and political structure in the newly formed America. Even though England went on to abolish slavery in 1807 and throughout its empire in 1833, and the Louisiana was purchased from the French, the blueprint for colonizing was firmly ingrained within the settlers, who were mainly of English origin. Was this Napoleon's land to sell? This fire sale approach is a key characteristic of colonialism, similar to the Pink Map project in 1885, in which Portugal assumed claim to the corridor of land in southern Africa between what it had already established as territory in Angola and Mozambique. This became a dispute with Britain, who also associated discovery with ownership, and both European nations refused to acknowledge who was currently occupying this land. The fire sale approach only views the physical land as a commodity and the indigenous people as a labour source that will aid its quest for wealth and power, and fails to recognise the true value that of the culture, value, knowledge, customs, lineage and generational legacy between the land and its people. So, to whom did this Louisiana territory actually belong? This land was occupied by white French settlers, commonly known as Acadians, who had settled from Canada during the 1700s. Enslaved as well as freed Africans, and a sizable population of indigenous Indians, with whom the English and other European settlers spent much of the 1800s in constant conflict and dispute as they attempted and succeeded in displacing these Indians from their lands which they had inhabited for thousands of years. How have the indigenous Indians preserved their culture, and what reparations have they received? And what of the land that was sold by Napoleon? What modern-day American states did this become? If you liked this podcast, you can listen to my other podcast episodes linked to this one, such as the Pink Map Project, The Ultimate Paradox, and the Book of Negroes, How Africa Came to Nova Scotia. Once again, it's a pleasure and a privilege to share my learning journey with you, and I encourage you, as always, to either begin or continue your own. History is a matter of fact or perspective. Thanks so much for listening again, and I'll see you on the next page.